It hasn't even been 24 hours since we got the big crash in crypto. However, looking at the daily view here in the market, it is a sight to see. We are seeing 20 to 30 to almost even 40+% losses across the board, with most of the top tier altcoins like HBAR, for example, down 18.5% on the last 24 hours. Now, on top of that, looking at a few other altcoins like even XRP, XLM, QNT, they are down about 12+% on the daily. The question here is this the start of the bear market, or is this the last major significant correction before the largest run up in this market? I'm betting on the second option. We'll talk about why here in a moment. But let's take a quick look at the market-wide view. So just going off of Bitcoin on the daily, down about 7.5% on the daily. On the week, 8%. Ethereum, 11.6 and 14.5. XRP, 12.3 and 17.3. Across the board, we have some pretty significant losses. Like I said, with XRP, it's not the worst of all of them. Some altcoins on just one wick we're down about 80%. So some of these losses are not even that significant compared to others. This is a very hard time to get through, especially if you are new to crypto. I don't want to bring up the excuse, oh, well, back in other cycles, we witnessed this almost every other month. However, we did, right? This is nothing new. This is volatility. Just as volatile, like when we think about this space, okay? The upside moves are definitely volatile, but just as much as they are going up, they are also the same going down. So when we see volatility like this, we think everything's done. It's over. And when we start to see things going crazy to the upside, we think this is just the beginning. It's just going to continue. It's all emotions. This entire move, though, I want you guys to understand, we will get through this. This is nothing new to the crypto space. Now, I want to talk about a few things. Number one, let's look at some of the key charts, like, for example, the total, aka the altcoin market. This level down here was a perfect retracement. It was a retracement back into major demand zones, going all the way back to 2024. This wick was also extremely significant because we are talking about in just a single daily candle. From the top of this candle to the bottom, this was a 21% plus drop. I'm not saying that we are bottomed here. I'm just saying that this would be a perfect time for us to bottom out on this chart. And in my opinion, especially if we go back and just look at the weekly views here, I want to go all the way back to one specific candle that everyone in crypto remembers, and that's the COVID crash. In the span of just a few weeks, and we're talking about roughly 1 month, we watched as the crypto market drop 65%. Right now, in terms of our total view, we are currently down 24%. This is a very normal correction. I know that it doesn't seem as though it is because, again, there's a lot more money tied to this market. This was a $1 trillion loss, but this is normal price action in crypto, especially a market that is as volatile as crypto. Now, on top of the total 3. I did expect this to sell off. I just did not expect it to sell off as much as it did. I was expecting us to maintain some higher lows here. Our wick is still a higher low compared to the low back in April, which did mark the bottom for the entire market. However, this is definitely a significant sell-off. In terms of the altcoin market, on a single weekly candle, we dropped 46+%. This is extreme in terms of a drop. Now, looking at this on some of the lower time frame structures like the 3-day or even on the daily is a very good view of this. We are finding support on a key level. Number one, the level in which I was hoping for us to find support on, right around 691 billion. The main thing that I'm looking at here, though, is RSI. The bottom back in April, we bottomed in June, right around the same level. RSI is very close to those bottom points, which tells us that, yeah, we might chop a little bit more throughout the weekend, but we should be bottomed around these levels. In fact, this recent move should be the bottom for this market. If it's not, then I would argue that we are essentially entering a bear market for crypto. I don't believe that we are, but I'm just saying that that's what I would be looking at if this was not the bottom. The same goes with the total. Obviously, on the daily, the trend line will look different here because I'm looking at it on a lower time frame. However, the daily view, here we have March, well, it's like February into March of this year. Here we have April, which did mark the bottom. Our RSI has a little bit more to go. Like I said, we could chop a little bit more before the weekly close, which again, the main thing on the weekly close that I'm looking at is just to close above some of these lows. Ultimately, I would like to close above 3.71 trillion. I would like to close a little bit above this trend line as well. We really just have to be patient here and see how things are looking. Also, with stocks, I'm really looking for a little bit more pain on stocks, and I know that that's crazy to say, but I'm looking at about roughly 64.46 to about 65.21. That would just be retesting some of these previous highs, and then from that point on, we probably continue to, 7K plus. With stocks, we could see that April bottom back here. RSI just got a complete wipeout. This is essentially a reset in terms of RSI. We needed this reset anyways. I was talking about it on, a few videos leading up to the sell-off that RSI was extremely overbought. And looking at this thing on the weekly, you could still see that overbought territory. We just broke down through the moving average. I do think that we have a little bit more pain here. Looking at the lower time frame structure, again, RSI was already printing bearish divergence while we were continuing to pump to the upside. So we knew that this was going to have, some sort of major pullback, just not as significant as we did see. But beyond that, this is technically very healthy. Now, one individual that is one to really kind of follow around this space, Tom Lee. Tom Lee recently said on CNBC that today's pullback looks like a buying opportunity and stocks could be 60 points higher a week from now. Check this out.
At Fun Strat, Tom, it's only one day. We get it. We're still, the bull market we heard earlier, still intact. But your take on today's move and what may lie ahead?
Well, Brian, it may be overdue to an extent. We've had a nice rise of 36% since the April lows, and I believe today's decline is the biggest in more than 6 months. But it's good to see the VIX spike. The VIX spiked at 1.29% today. That's the 51st largest ever spike in the VIX. So we're a top 1% move in sort of what I'd say the market seeking safety. And so I think it's a good flush that's happening today. I would like to say the market is, concerned, but as your other guests have said, especially Rick, unless there is a real structural change, this pullback is a buying opportunity.
Wow, 51st biggest move for the VIX. So why is it good that the VIX is responding? What does that signal?
It shows you that investors are seeking protection. And as the VIX is a measure of expected volatility of the largest 100 stocks. And so a spike in the VIX is really a market saying, okay, I need to get out of everything, but I can't sell everything. So let me hedge it by buying volatility. And that is usually a sign of an interim low. I don't want to say I think markets are bottoming today, but we know that the forward returns are pretty good 1 month and even 1 week later. So I would say if someone says, are we higher a week from today? I'm going to say the odds are actually really good. Or, we might even be 60 points higher.
Wow. But that's happened. That's what's been happening, as we talked about earlier in the show, Tom, that we've seen these buy the dip buyers come into the market. We get a day like today, the dip buyers come in, we're higher a week later. Do you expect that to happen again, absent some further escalation with China?
Yeah, I mean, anything's possible, Ryan. And I think that the markets lived through this February to April, and it was a day by day panic, and maybe there's echoes of trauma people are thinking about.
And I think that's exactly why the markets have been so shocked from this recent update from Trump, because again, they're thinking back to the beginning of this year, and all they're thinking about is, wow, these markets are cooked for the next, month, 2 months, maybe even 3 months. And I think that that's where almost everyone's going to make a huge mistake. I think so many people right now are still on the sidelines. They're going to wait it out. They're going to prepare for the worst in the next, month or two. They're waiting for lows. I really do think that we are going to bounce back. I also think that, so far a lot of these charts already started to show, signs of strength. For an example, when it comes to, a few of these charts like Bitcoin, I mean, Bitcoin, although, yeah, we had a nice sell-off back down to like 104.6K, that's a low that we saw, going all the way back to like roughly June. However, where we are still looking at closing potentially is still higher than the lows back in August. And even when it comes to Ethereum, yeah, we wicked down to that low going all the way back to July and the beginning of, August. Although where we are currently trading at is not the best. However, this was a nice liquidity wick that grabbed liquidity, retested a significant support zone, and we did bounce from that. Is it the strongest bounce just right now? No. And I do think that it is a little bit too early to call, for an example, all right, yeah, we're completely bottomed out. Things are going to go crazy going forward. Buy up the dip. No, typically, yeah, wait this out a little bit, see how markets look on Monday. But I do think that this sell-off was 100% exaggerated. I think that a lot of this was liquidations. There was like over $16+ billion in liquidations that sparked a massive cascade. And this led to $1 trillion being wiped out from the market. And even altcoins like XRP had a much larger significant wick to the downside of, $1.54 from a high. I mean, we're talking about in a single day, right? Like, let's think about this in a single day. Our high on that daily candle was $2.59, almost $2.60, and we hit a low of $1.52, almost $1.53. So when we think about how significant this sell-off was, yeah, it was extremely significant. XRP, wicked back to levels that we haven't saw since going all the way back to November of 2024, and this was all a liquidation wick. This was all liquidity wicking down to the downside, getting a cascade, if you will. A significant liquidation event like this, we've had them in the past, especially going all the way back to like 2020. I typically look at liquidation events like this as a bottoming signal. Also, for anyone out there that wants to play with, futures, this is exactly why I always tell everyone to avoid tapping in to futures, getting into these leverage positions, because we just witnessed so many traders get completely wiped out because of this. So when it comes to, being a player in the space, the best thing that you can do is just hold spot, have stablecoins on the sidelines at all times if you guys are able to do so, because you never know when something like this is going to hit. Right now, when it comes to crypto, main focus is Bitcoin, in my opinion. I'm looking at this on the 4-hour view. I did expect this to hold at least one of these three zones. We completely wicked down below all three. We wicked as low as 103.2K on this chart. Currently, I'm watching to see if this uptrend possibly holds on the 4-hour. Our 4-hour is completely overcooked, the most overcooked since going all the way back to April of this year, where we did see the market completely bottom out. It's still too early to call it right now. Looking at it on the 4-hour, I do want to see us reclaim 113K. After that, we start to really kind of reclaim some of these key levels. And then, if we manage to reclaim all three of these levels, then I do think that Bitcoin is bottomed and we should start to have that nice recovery. Looking at it on the daily, again, I would like to see a little bit more out of Bitcoin here. Maybe find some support around the previous support zones that we've had on this chart. Again, I would like to see 112.4K hold, just like we did see back in August. And then after that, we could start to kind of build back to 120K plus. But, we just have to give it a little bit more time here. I would advise to not go, all out and just throw money to the wind trying to catch a falling knife here. I would say, if you are looking to buy the dip, average in a little bit. Kind of wait it out, see if we see lower price action. If we do get that confirmation that we are bottomed and we start to kind of build back to the upside, hey, buying a little bit higher is not a bad thing. I see a lot of people say, oh, I wanted to buy the exact bottom. You're never going to be able to. That's also why I say, I would rather buy when we have clear confirmation that we are going to go much higher than trying to catch a falling knife. But overall, I do think that this market sell-off was definitely a huge exaggeration. Very similar back to April of this year. I really do think that this sell-off, even if it does continue a little bit more like I'm expecting, right? And this could go as low as 63, 93, just kind of retesting those highs going back to July and August. I really don't think that we're going to have to wait as long as we did back here from roughly February all the way through April, which was about 48 days. I don't think that we have to wait that long. I think that a lot of people are expecting us to have to wait this long and how the markets are just going to continue to sell off like this. I don't expect that. I think that we bottom sooner than most expect. And then from that point on, we start to really kind of build back to the upside. And just like Tom Lee is saying, it could change a week from now. We don't know exactly when, but that's why we just kind of give it a little bit of time. We, be patient during this time as well. And just kind of, stay focused on the big picture here, which is, is this the start of the bear market? I don't believe so. I really don't believe so. I think that once we get through this noise, which is exactly what I believe this is just noise, then we will start to see, the charts cooking yet again. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, definitely leave a like, subscribe, turn notifications on because of more free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord in the description below. And with that being said, guys, this has been Nick. Thanks for watching. Peace out.